It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bench Talk 101. This week we're joined by James Howard. He's a mallet maker. Unfortunately, I've got a good warning for it. James has a bit of a potty mouth, and he's known as the potty mouth woodworker. So I think it was suggested to me I should do this, and I think it is wise to do it. We've got a parental advisory explicit content warning here. So if anyone is around young children, please be aware. So over to you, James. I'm going to spotlight you, and I'm going to spotlight myself. And we're going to do this interview style. So, James, I guess you can say hello to everyone if you like.
Hi, everyone. My name's James. If you didn't hear what he just said, apologies for wearing the hat at the moment. It's about 5.5 degrees in the workshop because I've not managed to get the fire on until half an hour ago, but what is under here is not much better. So I'm a woodworker. I only started a couple of years ago, and I sort of fell into the niche of making exotic woodworking mallets out of woods that you probably wouldn't ever use for woodworking mallets. And that's sort of what I've become known for, but I just in general love woodworking. I've built a workbench. I've got lots of projects on the go, but Shrenik asked me to do a presentation, and when I was trying to think about what I was going to do, I kind of thought there's probably not a lot of stuff I could teach the people in this room about actually doing woodworking. So we decided we would just sort of do it interview style, just to sort of have a chat around, and then we can get any questions in afterwards. That's me. So
James, I guess start off by asking how you got into woodworking.
Bought an old house and refused to pay some of the prices that some people clearly thought they could mug me off on for helping with the renovation of it. So I just told them to fuck off, and I did it myself. And so it started as a sort of hobbyist DIYer, which then became a serious DIYer, laying 150 square meters of 25mm thick slate, Welsh slate tile in my downstairs sort of open plan living area, building a first floor orangery extension, building new rooms. And then sort of one day mid-house renovation, I looked at the shed that the previous owners had left, and I just went, that is a piece of shit. You are coming down today. I just knocked it down. And my wife came out and said, what are you doing? I went, knocking the shed down. She said, well, what about the house? I went, I need a shed. So I then built this shed, and she said about a week before, oh, you should put the house stuff on Instagram, become Instagram famous. People love that sort of stuff. I was like, no, no, not interested, not doing Instagram. I don't have the time. And she pushed me. And I was like, oh, fine. I'll, bear in mind, I was about a year into the renovation at this point. So I sort of did a load of backdated posts. This is where we were at. This is where we're at now. And then sort of the shed was my first real Instagram project, and started just talking to people, making contacts, and then sort of following people. And then I sort of started looking on YouTube and came across people like, April Wilkerson, and that's who YouTube was throwing at me. And then I found this guy called Matt Esley, and that is sort of history just writes itself from then on, because I just got really sort of engaged with Matt's content, and I decided then that I wanted to do woodworking. And I finished the shed, and I was walking out the shed past the garage to the house one day, and I sort of just looked at the garage and went, hang on a minute, this is an even better space, and then decided to fuck the shed and move in here.
Nice. So from moving into the garage, how did you start just making mallets? When did you make your first mallet? Give us a timeline.
Well, I started off as like, I need a workbench. So it was just about the time Matt was releasing his Power Tool workbench series. So I went, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna make that. So I built the Power Tool workbench. That was the first thing I did. And sort of going on YouTube, you always get the bit down the side. Oh, you should watch this. You should watch this. So again, I saw April Wilkerson making some mallets. I saw some other people making mallets. I was like, what? People make their own tools. They don't just buy it from the shop. This was alien, completely alien to me. So I was like, all right, fine. I can make a mallet. I'll make a mallet. So I made a couple of mallets. I've actually got them here. The first mallet I ever made. They're not in too good a shape anymore. because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and I made them very, very, very badly. Firstly, they're rosewood and beech, and I glued them with PVA, and they've completely separated. The wedges were terrible. They were way too big. I hit something once, and the head just flew off. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'm not going to make mallets. This is a silly idea. I'll buy the tools I need. And then there was another guy I saw who was making really nice mallets, but he was doing on a lathe. And I just picked up a lathe because someone wanted me to make a base for a trophy. I was like, oh, maybe I'll try making a mallet on the lathe. And he'd done it in maple burl, I think it was, and he dried it and he stabilized it. I was like, well, that looks like fun. I'll have a go at that. So I bought a stabilizing chamber and stabilizing resin, and I bought a little toaster oven and put these 2 bits of spalted beech in the toaster oven, went away, came back, and the toaster oven was on fire because it had gone up from 50 degrees up to 200 degrees, even though it was on 50. So the beech completely burnt. And again, I was like, I just need to stop making mallets. This is not the thing for me. But not being a quitter, I took the beech out of the oven that was on fire. I put it in some water till it went out, and then I dried it out again, stabilized it, cast it in resin, made a mallet, and then again decided I'm not doing this. I don't like this. This isn't fun. But other people are doing it. I just cut my losses. And then I did something called the Builders Challenge, or now the Makers Challenge, which I saw loads of you have seen. And I met a young girl called Anna Lee. And I think she was 13, 14 at the time. And she asked if I'd make her a mallet. I was like, really? They're crap. You don't want one of these. So she was like, no, I want one of your mallets because you're like the potty mouth guy from the United Kingdom. And how about if you make me a mallet, I'll make you a chopping board. I was like, yeah, fine. Okay, that sounds like fun. So I made her this mallet. Really wasn't a very good mallet again, but she loved it. And she put it on her stories. And I think at the time she had about 25,000 followers. And within 2 days, I had 2 people asking if I could make them a mallet. And actually, they both wanted a pair of mallets. And that's where it kicked off. I think it was June 2020. That was my first commission for a mallet of June 2020.
Wow, so it's not that long. It's not been that long.
No.
So talking about stabilizing sort of materials, have you found that from stabilizing materials, you can make a mallet of almost any piece of timber?
Yeah. I've made mallets out of Belvita.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. And I made pen blanks out of Belvita for Matt. And yeah.
It went a bit moldy.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't go too well. But, in principle, the whole point of stabilizing is you can repurpose timbers that you could never normally use for hitting other things and make it really useful. So, spalted beech is a fantastic it's not the nicest looking timber. You find a really nice bit. It's got some great character and color to it. But it stabilizes brilliantly. Bit of spalted beech that weighs 300 grams. Once you've stabilized it, it's over double. It's near 700 grams. The density is near leadwood. Massa birch is another fantastic one. Have I got any around here? I've got a bit of massa birch here. You can't see it very well because it's not finished. But massa birch, you'd never usually normally use it for a mallet or a mallet handle because it's too brittle. But you stabilize it and it goes up pretty much as dense and hard as lignum. It's almost becomes the hardest wood in the shop. So it gives you the options to sort of play with these colors, play with these combinations that otherwise you couldn't do.
Okay. And I noticed now that you've shown your first mallets and you showed how they snapped at the base of the handle. Your current design on the mallets,
it's a bit different.
It's very different.
Yeah.
And it would almost sort of strengthen the weak point.
So it's got a brass dowel down the middle. So it's in there quite tight. About a 6-inch brass dowel. No, I can't get that one out. Try another one. So 6 inches. The large mallets have about 6-inch brass dowels, sometimes 7-inch. It depends on the material. If I'm making a handle out of snakewood, say, I'll tend to go for a thinner dowel with a longer one, almost the entire length of the material, because snakewood is just a horrible material, not only to work with, but it breaks and shatters so easily. So the way you do that is decrease the internal tension and the pressure on the wood by just using a thinner dowel. It doesn't really need the strength. The dowel is there to really just hold the two pieces together, because it's got these indentations in the end, which have matching indentations on the inside of the handle and the head. So once you fill that with epoxy resin, it's not only a chemical bond, it's a mechanical bond as well. So that can literally never come apart. So with things like snakewood, I tend to use like a 12 mil dowel. So you're keeping more of the wood intact. You're not creating too much pressure internally, because it will just fracture.
Mm-hmm. And species like lignum, how do you glue them? Because you probably use epoxy, I'm guessing, to glue the rods in.
I use epoxy for everything, because brass doesn't bond to PVA, so it's epoxy is the glue that I use to put everything together.
Have you had any issues with epoxy gluing to species like the more oily species?
No, epoxy is what you should use, but you just have to prep them properly first. So if you've got an oily wood, bacote is an absolute pain in the ass. Things like bacote, lignum, even some of the Arizona desert ironwoods, you've got to really prep the surface properly, and that is why you should always have about 6 gallons of acetone in your workshop. So it's just making sure that before you glue that surface, it's wiped clean with acetone until you're getting no discoloration coming off on, use a nice white rag so you can see what's coming off. Once it's clean, get it glued then, because you leave it too long and the oil will start coming through again. And that's why you can't use PVA for glues like that, and you can't use oil finishes on woods like that, because the oil just pushes it out and it never properly cures.
I probably should have done this at the start, but have you got a finished mallet there?
I've got a few. Yeah. So that's my joiner's mallet, made out of figured leadwood, copper transition, and a camel thorn handle with a copper coin in the bottom. And I've got a matching detailing mallet there for dovetailing. I prefer the look and the feel of the square. I prefer a heavier mallet, but some people prefer the turn version. So that's a teak burl head, again with a copper transition and a camel thorn handle with the copper coin. And actually, this is actually the first square-headed mallet I ever made. This was like the prototype to see if they could even work, because I wanted to try and the whole point of developing these mallets was I didn't like this, the breaking up of the lines, and I just thought it looked messy, and I wanted to have a single piece. I wanted the wood to do the talking on the piece, so you've got continuous grain all the way around. There's nothing interrupting the flow of the grain on that wood. So this was just an experiment to see if I could do it, and it worked. But actually, this is mine. It's broken. You probably can't hear that. I don't know. But because this is one of the early ones I did, you'll see the dowels I've got now have got flat spots on there, whereas that one didn't. And basically what's happened there is resin failure, and the brass dowel has rotated within the handle. It won't ever come off again, because you've got that mechanical bond in there with the epoxy is packed in, but the flat spots on there should then in future stop that happening on any other mallets. It's always it's a continual sort of process of improvement. Anything you make, you can always make it better.
What's your favorite species to make them from then?
Ooh, favorite species. I mean, most popular species definitely the Massa birch and the maple bell. They're really nice to work with. I'd say my favorite, I'm really liking some of the Australian woods I've got, the Gidgee and the Australian blackwood. Just some of the patterns that come out of that stuff, it's just mad. And it's weird because the denser the woods are, the easier they are to work with on the lathe. They don't tear out as much. I hate working with things like bacote. Zebrano is a pain in the ass. Wenge. I hate working with anything like that where you've got the interlocking grain and it just wants to chip out all the time. So I like working with the denser, heavier woods. Not only do they serve a better purpose for the mallet, but also they're nicer to work with.
Okay. Is there something you want to tell us about your mallets?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I really focus on with my mallets is that they should be well balanced. And so the balance point should always be just below the transition. So you've just got a very slightly head heavy. A lot of the mallets I bought when I first started woodworking, the 20 quid beech ones you can buy on Amazon or from Axeman's, you got this massive beech head and this tiny thin little handle, and you're constantly fighting to use it. So I tried to develop something that was not only nice to look at, because I think if you're gonna spend money on a tool, then it should look half decent. It shouldn't look like a piece of shit. But it also needs to be functional. So the materials need to be picked to do the job they need to do. But it should also feel nice to use. There's no point having something if you use it for 5 minutes and you've got to put it down because it's uncomfortable or it's giving you wrist ache. So for me, it was really important to develop something that was, you could hold it for a long period of time. And fine, maybe not so much with the big mallets, although they do still have the same balance point just behind the transition. I mean, you're not going to be holding this. This is more of a mortising mallet for just whacking things out. But the principle is always the most important thing. Is not the weight, it's the balance. I get a lot of people say, I want a really light mallet. I need a light mallet. I can't use a heavy one. I go, no, I think the problem is you've probably used a light mallet that's got a really heavy head and a really tiny handle. So you think by having a lighter mallet, it's going to be easier to use. But a lot of people then find a heavier mallet that's well balanced and fits in the hand nicely is actually much more enjoyable to use.
That's really good theory, actually. Makes complete sense. So
if you can use the tool for 2 hours without it hurting, but before you could use it for an hour before you had to put it down, you've doubled your productivity.
So you actually teach a course on making your mallets, right?
Yes, I teach a course with Matt Esley. We call it #Esley because we're so original with naming stuff. Matt makes marking knives. I make mallets. So we run a course where you come to my workshop and you get to make your own mallet. You get to make your own marking knife. And throughout the day, we then have a plethora of topics that you can pick that we'll go over. So we can talk about wood selection. We can talk about wood identification, which is sort of a little not hobby, but something I'm really interested in. I love sort of trying to figure out what woods are. And Matt's fantastic at plane setup, sharpening, sawing. So we have all these different topics that we can both talk about that allow people to really personalize the day while they're here. And we're currently working on a design for an awl that we're going to be working on together, so that people can come and they can go away with a mallet, a marking knife, and an awl, which is a great way to great starting tools to have in a workshop.
So you're making mallets. You've just mentioned the awl. Is there anything else that you're thinking of making? Or do you not want to spill any of those beans just yet?
What are you leading me to, Shreddick?
I don't know. I don't know anything, so I'm asking.
Well, so at the moment, I've got an engineering lathe that came in a couple of months ago that I really want to use to just improve the efficiency of working with the metal, because all of my metal work at the moment is done on the wood lathe over there with the carbide tools, and it's absolutely fine. It's got me to where I am, but I think I can make it better, and any small saving in time is always going to just be preferable.
Hang on, so you're turning your dowels on the metalworking lathe, on the woodworking lathe?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, just use carbide tools. Carbide tools will work brass, bronze, copper, and aluminium absolutely fine. Copper's a little bit bitey. So where copper and aluminium are the more difficult ones to work with. They're so soft, and when they get hot, they get so much harder to work with. Brass and bronze are beautiful. You can cut them like you cut the wood. I use carbide tools. I don't use HSS tools, because if I was using HSS tools and I was doing a 3-hour session turning some of the woods I was turning, I'd spend 45 minutes sharpening. But I can easily just get through one carbide bit a year. It's just the time it saves me not having to continually sharpen. But yeah, I do all of the metal work, and everything is done on there. It's one of the reasons I can't at the moment do things like steel, because you can't, or like titaniums, or things like that, because I can't turn those on the woodworking lathe. Nice. So I'm somewhat limited by the tools at hand, but also woodworking tools can do a lot more than people think. You can cut brass and copper on your bandsaw. You can put brass and copper through your router table. You just have to be sensible with it.
So you were talking about the engineering lathe as well before I rudely interrupted you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I've got a big old gearhead machine lathe came in a couple of months ago. Just not had time to play on it yet, but I want to try and use that to improve the efficiency of the metalworking, and then want to start planning out a couple of more. I've got some tools I'm currently developing. I've got my own awl that I want to be able to offer, and I'm working on I came up with an idea for a plane adjustment hammer last year, trying to keep it very much sort of in the style of my other mallets with the transition and the balance. And I sent it out to a few people, and I got some good feedback and some not so good feedback, and the not so good feedback was more useful because it can tell me what I can improve. So I've got some plans to come up with a plane adjusting hammer, working on the lathe. And again, like I like my USP is choice. People can have whatever they want. If they want to have a Kingwood handle with a copper transition and a lignum vitae head on their mallet, they can. But I want that to carry through all the tools I offer. So I basically want to have a range of tools where someone can go, I want all of these tools in this wood and this metal, and it can be done. So yeah, working on all plane adjustment hammer, and I'm currently working on a design for some engineering squares, because all the engineering squares I've got piss me off. So I'm just going to make my own, and then people can have engineering squares handled and pinned in woods and metal to match all their other tools.
All right. Sounds perfect. And I think that's a perfect ending to segue straight into the questions.
Absolutely.
So if anyone who hasn't joined before doesn't know how to ask James a question, if you pop your name in the chat, I'll give you the opportunity to ask a question. So I'm going to unspotlight myself, and I am going to add Richard Berry, who also makes mallets.
Hi, James.
Hi, Richard. How you doing?
Good, thanks. I went and I found you on Instagram and did a bit of research on you before I watched before the talk. So
that sounds ominous.
I saw one of your posts, and Shrenik is known as Captain Purple Heart. You had a pile of Purple Heart thrown on the floor and were inviting people to send you as much as they wanted for you to burn.
Yeah.
I have turned Purple Heart on the lathe, and I think it turns beautifully. So I'd love to know what you have against it.
It's horrible. There's nothing nice about it. I think this is the thing. You speak to people. I think you speak to people that don't do woodworking, and you show them a bit of purple wood, and they go, "Oh my god, it's purple. Wood's not supposed to be purple," and everyone gets mystified by Paduke and Purple Heart, because I think they're so well advertised and so well marketed, and they're so abundant and they're so easy to get hold of. But the thing about Purple Heart is it's very rare to find Purple Heart that has some nice grain and some nice figure to it. Because the thing about Purple Heart, Paduke, and most exotic woods is 5 years' time, they're going to be brown, or they're going to be a much darker color than the beautiful, bright purple, red, whatever color it is when they first start off. They're gonna age, and they're gonna get darker. So the key for me is to pick an exotic wood that not only has a nice color, but has. So I've got this bit of Kingwood here for a mallet. It's really hard. The lighting here is not great, but so in years to come, that's also going to darken. That's going to go brown. But this figure, this grain pattern, this character in this bit of wood is still going to be there. So it'll be darker, it'll be browner, but it's still going to have that really interesting character about it. Was Purple Heart and Paduke just go brown, and it just looks like camel-thorn, not camel-thorn, knob-thorn, which is weird because knob-thorn is actually the one that camels eat. Camel-thorn isn't. But anyway, I diverge. But that's sort of what I've got against it, because if you want to keep Purple Heart looking like Purple Heart, you've got to continually sand it back and refinish it, or you've got to lacquer it to give it some UV protection. I don't think lacquer should ever be put on wood.
My secret to keeping Purple Heart purple is to keep it in my attic workshop that doesn't get any UV light.
Yes, keep it in a dark drawer so no one can ever see it. That tends to be what I do with my Purple Heart as well.
I thought you used it to heat up the log burner.
I did. That all got burnt. Well, actually, I lie. Matt took a load of it and he made some chopstick blanks out of it because annoyingly, it does. I got one of the Bridge City chopstick makers for the workshops, and the engineering on it is really good, and I can see the concept behind it. But some of the stuff they put in with it, like the planes and the plane blades, are shit, and they can only really cope with the basswood that they send. You start sticking anything harder through it, and you have to constantly resharpen the plane blade. But the Purple Heart does come out okay. It doesn't do so well with lignum. Lignum chopsticks do not come out well. No, that's one thing I want to do when I get the mill. Is I want to take a Veritas blade and mill it down to fit in the Bridge City plane, and then lignum vitae chopsticks. Everyone needs lignum vitae chopsticks.
All right, thank you, Richard. I think we're on to, is that Chester? There you go. There you go, Chester.
Mute. There. Nice presentation and some really beautiful mallets. Congratulations. I guess I don't have too many questions, but I am intrigued by, and I like your concept of the mallet head not showing the joint at the top so that the wood becomes a solid piece. What is your joinery for your handle to that mallet head? And is it something that you've come up with and perfected at this point, or is it something original? So you've got that metal stem.
Yeah. So the mallet head and the handle have a tenon born within them, and what I do is when I'm putting this together, I'll take the head and take the handle and I weigh them both, so I find out whereabouts I need to sort of position the dowel. When I first started, I got quite mathematical about it and I've got a physics degree, so I kind of was working out the leverage and where it needed to be. Now I sort of, having done about 130 of them, I just sort of do it by feel. But then what happens is I bore that out, and then I've got a very small parting blade that I then put in and put some corresponding nicks on the inside of both of the mortises. So then I make the tenon just out of actually it's a 9/16 inch piece of brass. So thank you that there are still Imperial people out there, because that's 14.3 mil and that's 15 mil, which is just a perfect fit. What I was doing previously, I was buying 15 mil brass, drilling a 15 mil hole, and then I was having to mill this down with my carbide tools to get it to fit, but it was too tight. So I was creating too much pressure when I was clamping these together. So I was having a couple of mallets were failing when I was making them because the epoxy couldn't escape. So this is just perfect. And then basically all I do is I fill that with like a 30-minute epoxy. That goes in there. The transition is just a disc of whatever metal the client chooses. That goes on as such, completely aesthetic. It has no structural addition at all. And then the handle goes on like that. Now, when I was starting making these, a lot of people, what they would do is they would drill out a 1-inch mortise in the handle, in the head, and a corresponding 1-inch tenon in the handle, and they would just glue those together. But when I started working with these really heavy woods, I was like, hang on, if I'm putting a beech handle on a lignum head, I'm removing that much lignum and replacing it with that much beech. That doesn't make sense, because I'm losing weight in the mallet. So I thought, well, how can I replace that? So I thought, I know, I'll use a rosewood dowel. I was like, no, that's just, I've got to turn the dowel. That just gets messy. Oh, I could do a rosewood dowel, and I could put a bit of brass down the middle of it to add some weight. And I was like, why not I just use a brass dowel? And it was just sort of about a half-hour conversation in my head. They just came about.
Now, the same thing on the square head mallets that you're doing?
Exactly the same thing, yeah. So the concept's exactly the same. There's the mortise in the head and the transition, exactly the same concept for all of them. There's no difference in the way they're put together other than the shape of the mallets.
Okay, it's interesting, because I was wondering if on the square ones, whether you were using an internal wedge, a reverse wedge, where you drive it in and it spreads that tenon out.
I did originally. That was my original. I had a conversation with someone. I think it's called a Fox wedge tenon. I think
Right.
I'm no expert, but I did think about doing that, and then I tried my one just with epoxy. And as long as you use epoxy right, epoxy is going to hold. Epoxy is bloody strong. I think a lot of people, they use too much and they don't mix it properly. They don't leave it to cure long enough. It's like anything. It's like PVA. If you glue something together for 25 minutes and then take it out of the clamps and put it through the planer, it's going to fall apart. It's like anything. But I think I've had maybe 3 out of the mallets I've made have had failures. 2 of them have been due to the wood, and 1 of them has been my error. All of them have been fixed.
It's important. I think it's important, the grooves of the etching that you're doing inside, because in any case, if they were perfectly smooth and you epoxied them, then they would allow for spinning. Not
exactly
so much.
that,
Not so much
exactly what happened
way,
with this one, because I didn't have the flat spots on the tenons in the previous ones. That
right.
Admittedly, I was hitting something really far harder than I should have been hitting with it, and it's still going. But that's product development. It's going, I've got a problem. How do I fix it? There we go. I fixed it. Right. And there'll be another problem in 2 months' time that I'll go, why didn't I think about that before? But
now on your square mallets, are you angling the faces down so that when you pivot, it's hitting flat, or are you doing square end? Sorry about my hand.
No,
are you doing square end?
I just do square faces, but I always give the client the option if they want to have. It's easy enough for me to do. The thing I like about the square mallets is actually a lot of it's hand tool work. So a lot of it, the only thing I really do on the lathe is obviously if I'm doing one of these, everything's on the lathe, the head, the handle, everything. Whereas with the square headed mallets, once I've done the handle and the transition, it comes off, it goes in the vise, it's block plane, files, hand sanding.
And are you redoing those are you doing a final turning after you've completed them together? So you're shaping the brass ferrule and everything into one?
It's all glued together as one. And then, so I've got one here that's ready to go. So that one is all glued up. So
so very roughly turned.
Very roughly turned. And the only reason I rough turn it is so that I can then switch it around in the chuck, and I can make sure the 2 faces of the mallet are parallel. So when I come to clamp it, I'm not getting any angles. I don't turn the end of this mallet, because what happens when you glue up, because you've got that 15 mil mortise and the 14.3 mil tenon, you're going to get a little bit of movement either way. So, and wanting this to be the thickest part of the mallet, by not turning that to start with, it just gives me that leeway to keep that size. But if I turn that to size first and it shifted, I've got to take 4 mil off the entire width of the mallet handle.
So that leads me to ask, do you take it off the lathe and check it for balance and then put it back on the lathe to, say, compensate, or do you have all your measurements incremented and you're already just using calipers to keep them all consistent? Because you were talking about your balance, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that would change depending on the weight of the wood, the diameters, the turning.
So I'll always turn the head first, because when I'm doing the coins in the bottom, there's no tailstock support. So I like to have the head in the chuck, so I've just got more support. So I turn the head first, and once I've turned the head and done that, I take it off and I start getting a feel for, are we head heavy, am I tail heavy? And that will be the last point at which I will make my judgment call on how I'm going to shape the handle. Because once I get it in that chuck, although it should be perfectly central, it should be perfectly cylindrical, there's every chance that I take it out, put it back in, it's going to be off by a mil, and then suddenly,
doesn't take much.
A lot of it is now just done by experience of, I'm pretty sure I know what that's gonna feel like. And you know what, if it comes off and it's unbalanced, there's nothing that can't be fixed. But normally it comes off and it's there or thereabouts where I need it to be.
Yeah, very nice, James. Thank you. I haven't taken up too much time. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chester. We're on to Jim, presumably to talk about how Purple Heart is terrible.
No, I was that made my day, actually. I'm glad I saw it.
I did tell James the other day that you would love the fact that he hates Purple Heart.
I got a funny feeling it was almost like an echo in some conversations that we've had on here before, Shrenik. You know, like, well, I don't like it because it turns to, was it camel poo, isn't it, James?
It's all right.
No,
I now love Purple Gidgee.
Knobthorn.
Knobthorn. Knob
Just
poo.
a very boring brown African hardwood.
Question. I did actually watch your burning ceremony. That was brilliant. But yeah, so that made my Christmas, I think it was, wasn't it?
Welcome.
But,
You're welcome.
Just asking for a friend of mine, how do you finish your mallets?
Yeah, so that is something that has evolved as well, because there is no one sort of all-encompassing finish that that you can use on everything. Because say if you've got something like lignum or an Arizona desert ironwood, it's a very oily wood. You can't put an oil base, you can't put tongue oil on it. Like tongue oil was one of the first finishes I really embraced, because tongue oil and sported beach just go really, really well. But you can't use tongue oil on something like Bacote or lignum, because the finish won't cure and it just gets messy. So I had to start looking around for other finishes, and I stole Matt Esley's finish that he does for his knives, which is I don't use it anymore, but it's a cellulose sanding sealer, and then a friction polish, and then a microcrystalline wax. So I used that for a time, and that's very sort of all encompassing. It can go on everything, and it won't affect the woods in any way. But I now use a shellac, homemade shellac finish with, there's this hard wax oil I found. It's not very good, but it's reasonably available in the U. I think it's called Alfie Shine, I think.
Yeah, all right. I'll do a leading question anyway, because my mate asked me. You see, I had to ask you that question. But and thanks very much for all the promotion you've been doing.
No, I'm happy to promote a product that's good. But no, I use shellac, and the reason I use shellac is I used to poo-poo shellac quite a lot, because I think you see people overusing it and using it incorrectly, and I sort of tried to steer away from it quite a bit. But firstly, it's available everywhere. Everyone in the world can get hold of shellac flakes and denatured alcohol. Everyone can get that. So it doesn't matter where I'm sending the mallets to. I send them all over the world. Someone should be able to get hold of shellac. It's easy to mix. It's easy to customize. And the one thing that I was finding when I was using tongue oil, I used Osmo a lot to begin with, is I'd forget to reorder, and I'd get to the bottom of the tin and then go, fuck, I've run out. I've now got to go and order some more, and then you've got to wait 2 days to, if you don't order till 10 o'clock, it might not come till, and if it's on a Friday, you might not get it till Monday. So running out of finishes was sort of putting time pressure on me, and I decided to move to shellac, because I can mix it up. I've got a little one of the magnetic mixers. I can mix up a new batch in 2 hours in the shop. If I put it on the night before, I've got it the next morning, and it just goes on everything. It works perfectly. And the brilliant thing about shellac and the Alfie Shine combo is that you can spot repair it. It's because it's a surface finish as opposed to a penetrating finish, which again, I was never really a fan of, because I wasn't a fan of varnish and lacquer and all these things. But a lot of the woods that I'm using don't need or take a penetrative finish well. So sometimes, you look at things like snakewood, ironwood, lignums, the really dense one, leadwood, I won't shellac them at all. I will just put Alfie Shine on. I'll polish them up to maybe 800 grit and then Alfie Shine them. Anything below that, I tend to sort of anything below 1 SG, I will, unless it's stabilized, I will shellac and then Alfie Shine the top.
Yeah. I mean, shellac is quite a hard finish, contrary to what people think. If you mix correctly, and again,
use it correctly. It's people. A lot of people again don't realize that French polish is not an actual polish. It's a method of applying shellac. Sure. And sure. I know you get 1 pound cuts and 2 pound cuts, and I tried both of those. I think mine works out about a 0.8 pound cut, and I prefer to do more coats of a thinner finish because it dries quicker, it dries harder, and it's longer lasting. And I've not, as of yet, had a mallet have a problem with that finish combo. And
it burns into itself when you repair it, so it's just perfect. Thanks very much for the talk tonight. It was really, really good.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Jim. We've never failed to get a product placement in for you at certain points, but it's been a while since we had the last one. Matthias, you've waited a while.
Yes, I thought I should let someone else get the first word in for a change. So thank you very much. That was hugely interesting in many ways. Couple of questions.
Cool.
I think you were saying that, if I understood you correctly, you now on your brass pins or your brass dowels, you put some sort of, was it hexagonal bit at the end, or?
I'll grab one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's I'm not sure how well I can.
Yeah, I see it. So how do you mate that to the mortise? So, I mean, how do you shape the mortise to mate with that?
I don't shape the mortise. So the purpose of the flat spots is so that they will get infilled with resin.
Right.
And they'll then prevent the dowel being able to spin within the resin. Within the resin, which I think is what happened with this one. It's not coming apart, but the dowel has got a little bit of a movement in the resin, but the flat spots on the end should just prevent that little bit of movement within the handle.
I see what you mean. Now, I thought that you actually tried to create a mechanical lock with the wood as well, but
that would be quite
a tricky operation.
Yeah, I'm not that good.
No. So I was also. You didn't go into that very much, your stabilizing process. I'm not very familiar with those. So what does that entail?
But basically what it entails is you take a big chamber and you put the wood that you want to stabilize in the chamber. You cover it with stabilizing resin and you place it under vacuum for an extended period of time. And well, a lot of people, the misconception is people think you are filling the wood cells up with resin. You're not. If you start filling the wood cells up with resin, you don't have wood anymore. You're going to change the wood at a cellular level. What you're doing is you're filling up the air gaps in between the wood cells. You're sucking all of those out under vacuum, and then you're pumping a very, very, very low viscosity. It's a heat cured resin, so it doesn't cure until it's heated up to 93 degrees for 3 hours. So you pump that back in when you release the vacuum and apply atmospheric pressure. You're supposed to leave it under atmospheric pressure for twice as long as it was under vacuum. So if it's been under vacuum for 24 hours, you're supposed to leave it for at least 48. I'm too impatient for that. So I bought a pressure chamber, and I've actually shown that 5 hours in a pressure chamber is better than 72 hours of atmospheric pressure. Right. So not only can you accelerate the amount of stuff you can do, because the thing is, if you have your chamber and then you've got to leave it for 3 days with some wood in there soaking up resin, you can't use your chamber for 3 days.
No.
So just being able to save a couple of days here it's little things like that have helped me as I go along. And then once it's taken up the resin, you wrap it in foil, stick it in the oven at 93 degrees for 3 hours, and it solidifies. And some woods don't stabilize very well at all. The soft woods don't stabilize well in the slightest, because again, the misconception is, softwoods, they're really soft, they should take up loads of resin, but it's only because they've got bigger cells. They've actually not got a lot of air in the wood. There's not as much gap to fill. But it's more of an art than a science, I'd say. Sometimes something comes out and I go, why hasn't that worked? And I have no idea, but that's the game.
Yeah. Also, I was wondering, to what extent, I mean, if you've only been doing this since 2020, I dare say you have yet to become fed up with it, but are you fearful that at some point it might become too good of a business, that it takes over the too much of a woodworking time?
Yes and no. My aim was never to do this as a full-time job, because I've got a good job, pays the bills, keeps the roof over my head. I don't do well with stress, and if I had to stress about having to sell 4 mallets by the end of the week to make sure my mortgage got paid, that would not be good for me. That would not be good for my family. So my main aim is just to have my workshop fund itself. So, and at the moment, the mallets help do that. Sometimes I do get a bit fucked off with it, because I'm like, I want to build that thing over there, or I want to build that thing, but I can't because I've got all these bloody mallets to finish.
Yes.
But I shouldn't take on those commissions if I'm going to get pissed off with it. And I think I have got to the point a couple of times in the last sort of 3 or 4 months where I've said to people, I need 6 weeks, I need 8 weeks just to get the backlog sorted, because it's always very tempting. Someone goes, I want a mallet. You go, oh, money, yes, please, yes, please. But then if you can't deliver on that, then, and I've had the point where I've taken on too many, and I've had to go to people and say, oh, it's going to be a little bit longer than I hoped. And when that does, sometimes life happens, life gets in the way.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Things out of your control. I always just try to say to people and just be honest and go, look, I'm really sorry. It's going to be an extra 3. It's going to be an extra 4 weeks, or this has happened, or I've had a problem with the mallet. I think being open about these things is the best way. But yeah, I've sort of encountered that a little bit, and I'm wary of it. But I'm the sort of idiot that just pushes myself far too hard, and is very bad at saying no.
Yeah. No, I was wondering because I've sort of I've seen or heard similar things from other tool makers that it once their stuff starts to make a name for itself, if you are doing it, if you're still basically on a one-on-one or very low scale production level, it can get quite tricky to keep up with the demand, and all of a sudden you have this hugely stressful backlog of orders that means that you are. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that, but
I think this is where efficiency comes in.
Yeah.
So it's actually, I find it easier now that I have more orders than when I had fewer, because when I had fewer, I was going, right, I've got 1 mallet to make this week. Okay, so I'm going to do the handle and I'm going to do the head. Oh, I've got to make the dowel. Oh, the transition. Oh, where's the... Everything was sort of... Whereas now I go, right, I've got 30 over there or 10 over there. And a lot of them are stock mallets, because I get some people that don't want to commission one. They want to just buy one now. It's that, sense of, I don't want to wait. I want to give you money now and have the thing. So I try and keep a low level of stock for people. But I can now go, right, I've got 20 mallets to do. Okay, today we're doing handles. Tomorrow we're doing heads. Today I'm going to just spend a day making dowels, making transitions, trying to build that sort of that stock of material, so I can go, oh, I'm going to make 1 mallet today. Fine. Got all the bits. So yeah, trying to make the processes as efficient as possible so that I can either have more time indoors or I can take on more without getting to the point where I'm overwhelmed.
Right. I see. Thank you very, very much. And thank you ever so much for the presentation. Very interesting indeed.
Thanks, Matthias. We're over to Paul. If I have to, I will turn on the live transcript.
Transcript? I don't think that's really necessary, Shrenik. No, we have this joke because the actual Zoom transcripts understands me less than Glaswegians, people from Finland. He understands all of them, Matthias, all of them. He doesn't get Yorkshire. So, a couple of questions.
None of us do. It's...
Coins. Do you have those stamped for you, or is it something
I make them myself.
Right. So do you make them in a disc and then just basically hammer it, or?
I buy a 25mm rod of whatever, of either brass, bronze, aluminium, or copper, and then I've got some steel presses, and I've got a 12-ton hydraulic press that I just press them down. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I originally
answers the second.
So originally I had these made for me. So these were laser cut by a guy in the Czech Republic, but he could only do brass or aluminium. And then when I started to want to offer copper and bronze, I didn't look right having a copper transition with a brass coin. So I was like, right, I've got to do this. I've got to do this myself. I looked at CNCs and things, but actually I quite like just the simplicity of just a hand stamped coin,
Yeah.
and because I cut them off on a metal bandsaw, on the inside of the hashtag, you still have all the saw marks from that, and I quite like that you get this different texture to it, and it's, you know what, it's simple, it's quick, easily batched out, and if I need another one, it only takes me 5 minutes to make another one.
I guess that also then draws me onto the transitions of you get the inner's rod and you cut it on the bandsaw.
Basically, yeah. So what I do at the moment is currently I will buy a 40mm rod of whatever. Actually, the bronze is lovely because it comes with a 14mm bore already down the center of it. So all I've got to do is cut that off and open that up to 14. But so I cut a disc and I put it on the woodworking lathe with the Jacob's chuck as seen there, and I drill a hole out. Hopefully, having the engineering lathe, I can take a 15mm, 150mm length of 40mm. I can bore that out in one and then just slice it off on the bandsaw, rather than having to do, at the moment, these have to be made one by one, which is a bit of a funnel point for time. But
yeah, it also looks like it'd be fun with the fact of how much distance you've got there when you go in with a chisel.
yeah, it's not that bad. But I say probably making the transitions is the thing I find hardest at the moment, because it just takes so much time. But that's what, so the engineering lathe will hopefully make that a lot quicker. And I've also now one of the, I do have a new edition at the moment of this Makume Gane. So that is now becoming available for future commissions. And that is copper, brass, and nickel, I believe.
Yeah, for future high-end commissions.
Yes, because
it's not cheap. It's not particularly cheap, is it? From what I understand,
it's not. But it's. I always thought that it had steel in it, which is why I never looked at it before. I didn't realize it was all soft metals that I could work with, because I can't. I'd love to be able to work with Damascus and, you know, some of the Timascus ones, but I'm not putting titanium on that. It's a terribly stupid idea.
Yeah, I did see that somebody actually managed to just snap a saw with chisel because they caught a chuck.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've got a drill lathe and I've got a couple of other lathes which I've yet to get my bench up to actually use the proper lathes, but I've used the things, and I have thought that actually the drill lathe is quite useful with the fact that you can have it turning at really low speed. I think you turn the speed right down when you're doing the metals.
Actually, copper, I turn it down. Aluminium, I turn it down. Brass and bronze, I'll turn it at 1600, maybe 2000. It turns absolutely fine. You get you actually get a better finish on it, doing it at higher speed.
Yeah,
it's mad how much you can carve away at brass and bronze with the carbide tools.
Yeah.
The hardest thing is going from the wood to the metal. It's not actually working the metal, it's changing the pressure you're applying when you're going from the metal to the wood, because
so you're leaning into it a bit more with the metal.
It's more of a scrape, so I'll come up underneath. So if it's hard to demonstrate, but rather than with the wood, you would just go sort of in and along. With the metal, I tend to scrape up and off, so I avoid catching the metal on the tool. But honestly, it's so soft. It's a joy to work with. It really is. Copper, I hate.
Are you basically using the ones which have got sort of like the 10mm cutters, carbide? Yeah. That's roughly what I thought.
I go through about one of those blades a year. That will do me about 80 mallets.
I've actually got something similar which I'm not using, but it's got a defense shield on it.
A defense shield?
Yeah, basically. So for when chips are flying at you, it's got a deflection shield. I'm not sure about the deflection shield, but I thought it's useful, and it came with a lathe. So,
I mean, you can't have too much health and safety. There's no harm with having too much protection. There is harm with having too little.
Yeah. Eye protection minimum.
Yeah, well, I've got one of the
Have you
powered
got the one with
It-
the breathers on the back?
No, they're too expensive. They're ridiculous. They're like 1,200 quid. That is fucking
Yeah.
mental. I say that I'll have one next week now because the idea has been planted. But I've got one of the Axminster ones, which are terrible. They're terrible, but they fall apart. But luckily, you can buy all the replacement parts from Axminster.
Yeah. Main thing is if you're doing things like Coca-Cola and things, this guess of having the right sort of dust mask as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, working with Coca-Cola, you've got to make sure you've got good air filtration, good extraction. You know, don't breathe that shit in. It's just stupid. And you is disgusting to work with, but does look quite pretty. Stabilizing you actually is a really interesting one because when you,
no, I was going to say we've not worked together.
yeah.
I thought bit harsh.
when you stabilize you and you put it in the oven at 100 degrees for 3 hours, the whole thing is smoking with black poison goo.
Yeah, I take it you don't use a kitchen oven then.
No, I used to. Then my wife got a bit fucked off with that, so I got an oven for the workshop. So I can stabilize my wood and cook a pizza at the same time.
But not when you're doing you.
No, not when I'm doing it with you. No.
Okay, I think I'm done, James. Thanks very much, mate.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. We're on to Eric. Where is Eric?
Hi, James.
There he is.
Well, that was very, very, very interesting. Paul has sort of stolen a bit of my question. I was going to ask about the dust and the extraction and stuff, but he's kind of covered that. The other thing I was curious about was when you talked about the weight and the balance, and I was just thinking some of the favourite hammers and mallets that I currently use are actually balanced at that point, just behind the handle, and that's it's obviously a good thing to do. But if you were making one and you wanted a heavy head and you didn't want a thick handle, would it be sensible to put weight at the end?
I have had a couple of people that have asked for unbalanced mallets. So there was a lady I did a mallet for who was she's a stone carver, and she'd been using a metal-headed mallet for her metal chisels, but the sound was just driving her nuts of the metal on metal. And I said, well, let's look at I think I did a little one of these with a gidgey head. I said, let's do a really hardwood end grain mallet. But she said, I need it to be top heavy because that's what I'm used to. And it's just about moving that transition, moving the dowel back or moving the dowel forwards. Or sometimes, I've taken a mallet out and it's been seriously head heavy and I've gone, fuck. So I've just drilled out a hole in the bottom of the mallet and stuck a 75 gram bit of brass in there just to bring it back. That's what I said. There's always a way of fixing these things. If I take a mallet out of the lathe and I go, oh, shit, even if the coin's in, I can drill the coin out. I can heat it up and the epoxy will fail and the coin will come out. There's always a way to fix it. But so I always say to people, I think balance in the mallet is more important than weight. But if someone really wants a mallet out of balance, I'm not going to say no. I'll call them an idiot, but they're the ones that are paying for the thing. They should get what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that being able to sort of wobble it is a lot easier than having to keep lifting it and laying it.
I think it depends on the mallet as well. So I think so. The detailing mallets, they're more for you're doing dovetailing. You're finer work. You need more control over the mallet. You're probably going to be holding it for a longer period of time. You might be sat down for a couple of hours just doing fine chisel work. You want something that's not going to provide a lot of force because you're not removing a lot of material. Whereas if you're like when I made my workbench and I was having to cut 2-inch deep mortises out of Sapelian bog oak, this one, although it's balanced, it's got a longer handle so that, as you say, you can just it's about creating those points where you could use this for finer work if you wanted to because it is well balanced, but it weighs 1.2 kilos. So the balance is fine, but holding that for an extended period of time is not going to be enjoyable. That is more hold it at the end, get the job done, put it down. And that's sort of where the the sort of the compromise between weight and balance comes in is I always say to people, what are you going to use it for? And if they say, oh, I want a square-headed joiner's mallet, but I'm going to use it for doing dovetails, I say that's not the one you want. A lot of people, so this one here is the turn joiner's mallet, is what I call the toolbox mallet. So if you were only going to have one mallet in your toolkit, that's the one to have, because it weighs about 750 to 900 grams. It's long enough that you can get a lot of force in it if you need to, but also light enough and well balanced enough that you could use it for finer stuff. If you just wanted one mallet, that's the only one you were going to have, sort of your jack of all trades sort of thing. But they're entirely customizable to whatever people want them to be.
Right. Okay, no, thanks very much. Digging a bit further into this sort of dust extraction thing, because I'm a sort of more sort of almost an aspiring woodworker. I've done woodwork on and off over the years, but I'm finally building myself a workshop. I'm going to take it a bit more seriously, and I'm thinking dust extraction, because at the moment the place is just filthy.
Yep.
It just gets covered in dust because I don't have any extraction. And is it better to have a sort of smaller thing that attaches to the tool, or is very close to it, or a larger sort of 6-inch, 4-inch diameter?
I think it again depends what you're doing. You also have to accept the fact that no matter how good your dust extraction and your air filtration is, there's going to be fucking dust everywhere.
No
It's about
escape.
minimizing that. So for my lathe here, I've currently just got one of these, the hoovers at the top, more to catch the fine stuff, because the bigger stuff will just fall to the ground. It's really, for me, it's trying to keep the fine stuff out of the air, because it just gets everywhere. But I also have the sort of the air filter up there as well, which is, I don't tend to have it on. I tend to put it on at the end of the day once I've gone, turn it on for 2 hours just to sort of clear the airspace. But if I'm working with something like Cocobolo or or something that's not very nice, that's on constantly. And I also have the respirator. But yeah, I mean, most tools, you look at your planers, your band saws, things like that, it's all self-contained. The extraction is what the extraction is designed to be. I think with anything like a lathe where it's very open, it's personal choice. You see some people that have a big 6-inch at the top and a big 6-inch at the bottom, because they're just trying to minimize how much dust goes everywhere. For me, I don't mind it dropping on the floor, because I'll just get the extractor hose, hoover it all up, goes into the bag. For me, it's more just I want to keep the fine stuff out of the air, because I don't like wearing a mask in the workshop if I can avoid it. And so keep the air clean, keep your lungs clean.
Yep, no, sounds like a good idea. No, I love the idea that, there's no such thing as problems. You just need to find a solution for it. Because I think every day is a school day. I learn something new every time I go in the workshop, every time I do anything. And the second one will always be a lot better.
There's no such thing as mistakes. The only mistake is not learning from those mistakes. And it's the person that goes into their work or leaves their workshop at the end of the day and goes, I've done it. I've completed woodworking. I'm the best. But that you're done. That you've reached the point where you're finished. Stop, because if you're not willing to accept you're wrong or accept there's a better way of doing something, you may as well stop.
Absolutely, I'm right with you there. But no, thanks very much, James. That's really useful. Good to see you. Take care.
Thank you very much, Eric. James, one last question from me before we wrap up.
Sure.
I've got this lovely mallet here, made by Richard Hughes, one of our members here, and it's got lead pipe in the end there.
Lead's poisonous. He sold you poison.
Yeah, well, it's poisonous, but only if you ingest it, right? Have you considered using lead as the internal part of it?
No, because it's too soft. It's too soft.
Okay.
It's I
don't mean for the structural element. I mean for weight. So if you're using a lighter timber.
Never had any need to use anything other than brass. I'm rarely, if I'm working with a timber that's so light it would need lead, it's in the chamber being stabilized. So if I can't stabilize a wood to a useful weight or a useful density, I won't use it. Plain and simple. Most of the woods I'm using are in excess of 850 SG or 0.85 SG. A lot of them are over 1, and most of the stuff I stabilize is 1.1 by the time it's done. So I'm often at the point where the wood's too heavy, and I've got to find a way of removing material to get that balance point right. But I've rarely been at a point when I've had a mallet that's really too light, and I've struggled to sort of get it where I need it to be.
Okay, well, that simply answers the question.
I'm always honest.
We're going to remove all the spotlights here, and we're going to do our usual toast. And I love that you've unscrewed the cap already, completely without knowledge of anticipation for this. But we always end the talk with a toast. Toast to James and a toast to the bench. Cheers, everyone.
James on the bench.
James on the bench.
Thank you very much, James.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.